Jonny, you've spoken in the past about how your mindset has not only transformed your mental health, but also your performance as an athlete. Were you always able to tap into that, or was that something that you discovered?
Do you know what? I think I was able to tap into it. And I think it used to be known as just as being childlike, being fully engaged. That's almost tapping into it. As you said, about the present moment. You connect to your performance, whatever you're doing, through feeling it, through sensing it. And that, I think, was always something I was able to do, but I didn't own it. I'd get on the field, I'd have a ball in my hand, and bang, I'd fall into it. And then I started listening to a lot of stuff that said, well, in order to have more of those moments, you've got to work for it. So you almost have to practice the opposite in order to fall into, you've got to suffer to have joy, as it were. Instead of looking and listening to that version of me that was loving life and connecting on those levels, I kept listening more to the practical one that was really suffering and fighting for this right to have a few moments of joy. So I just did more of that and less of the joyful stuff until it got to a point where the biggest teacher I had in my life was just ultimately a sense of suffering, and I could feel it was no longer possible to live this way because it wasn't in alignment with who I am at the core, and that suffering kind of asked me to shift.
But it's quite hard, I think, for a lot of people to tap into that, let alone someone who is a professional athlete. And often I think the support is not necessarily there to help people tap in. I mean, in sports, do you think that support is there? I mean, maybe it's better than it used to be, but mental health for athletes is, I guess, a big talking point. And even the last time we spoke, we talked about how there was a manifestation coach for the Euros team. That's something we wouldn't have seen a long time ago. But do you think we've got a way to go with people in these very high pressure situations?
The way I see it is almost you have this state that you're in. For me, it was often that survival state, trying to get through your game instead of enjoy it. And you want to enjoy it, which is the create state, as we're talking about. And you sort of go, I want to move from survival to create. And you want to just hop straight across. And so you try, and trying is just reminding you you're not in that state. And the bit in the middle for me, which is so much of the interesting, exciting part, was that the beginnings of that journey is just relaxation, letting go, permission to soften, to find the beginnings of safety where there's survival, and then let it unfold towards enjoyment. We think we can control enjoyment or inspiration. And what is less inspiring than forcing inspiration? It's not inspiration. It's not enjoyment. If you control enjoyment, it's not joy. That was the beginnings of the courageous shift that it always takes and continues to take to move from survival. Is the courageous part of being like, I have to leave space for a collaboration between me and this, which I thought was the universe, but it's actually, for me, it's now becoming the higher part of me, which I've disconnected from, which holds the secrets to my better performance and everything else. But I wanted to own it all. And as a result, who I was kept controlling everything. And so I just felt dictated to. And my life got smaller and smaller and smaller, like a set of those Russian dolls. You kind of, in order to control, if the last one is controlling the next one, it can only be smaller than what it's come from. But when you add the unknown, it's like surprise and magic, and that's joy, I think. I don't know what you think about that.
Well, I mean, I love everything that you're talking about. It's just really speaks to me, and the journey really, because it's obviously, what you're encapsulating is a healing journey, but also a return to self.
Definitely.
Which is what my work is all about. And I love the way that you talk about childhood. And this idea that we're born. So this, this thing that the idea that mindfulness is something that's outside of us, that doesn't, isn't integral to who we are. We're just we're just remembering really. And as children, we are often able to express our joy or be in the moment, or just, it's different with this generation, with the technologies, but with our generations, we really were able to just be in flow state. And what that is, that sort of creativity, that flow state of just whether you're kicking a ball or throwing a ball or writing or dancing or singing, or just being uninhibited and unapologetically where you are in the moment. And that is joy. So when we lose that and we go into the mind and really what you're talking about, the love of the game, this joy of the game, and you went into it, and then suddenly you're abandoning self, and there's an abandoning of self. And I love this idea of the Russian dolls, because it's what happens on the journey. We end up in these places, and so many people will recognize this who are listening. And it's wonderful that you share your story in this way, because it's so important and so inspiring, especially for men, because this idea of reclaiming the pieces of ourselves, going from this very small place where suddenly you wake up and you feel a sort of a hollowness and an emptiness, and then returning and saying, okay, I need to get back. And really the mindful way that we do that. So the tools, how do we get back to this state of just our authentic being in ourselves and giving ourselves to permission really to be expressing our joy in the world, really what that feels like in real time.
And there's so much I want to pull out of that, because you mentioned flow state, talking about pressure. There's also a lot of a kind of performative nature, I think, to a lot of the way we talk about wellness, mindfulness. When we look at social media, we see a lot of people talking about this stuff, and that can be possibly a double-edged sword. Estelle, you mentioned, kids on devices, and the fact that we're all locking into ideas about how we maybe should be turning up, how we should be practicing mindfulness. And maybe that's slightly at odds with the way we actually feel inside, which, as you mentioned, Jonny, is that kind of really joyful, authentic flow state. I mean, what do you think about social media and how it intersects with these ideas? Because I guess it can be a force for good and possibly slightly something a bit darker.
Wellness has become an industry. So it's $1 billion industry. And because of that, people want to get on the wellness bandwagon. And what does that mean for everyone else in the world? What it means is there's a lot of stuff out there. There's a lot of information, and it can get really confusing. And we can get back into, I've got to have this really long routine in the morning. I've got to have a morning routine in order to be well. Right. I think that it's better that it's there than it's not there. I feel that ultimately our society needs us to be talking about our mental health. It needs us to be talking about how we feel. And it's great that we can go online. It's great that we can go on Instagram or wherever, and we can easily find, hacks or whatever you want to call, these ways of being in the world quickly. That's really useful for us. Where I feel it can lose its way is when there is suddenly a look to wellness, and if you're not drinking a matcha and it hasn't got certain milk, and you're not doing this, and you're not showing up in the way that you should show up. And I feel like bringing it back down to basics. I mean, if we can actually take, even from just this part of the podcast, what it means, what true wellness is about. This idea of being mindful, this idea of just showing up in the moment, and it's enough. Ultimately, it's just about being enough. And if you can just make a commitment to yourself to show up that day in a way that is just a little bit more loving, a little bit more mindful, and it doesn't have to be that you're meditating. It doesn't have to be that you're at a sound bath. It doesn't have to be that you're drinking matcha. It can just be, I'm going to take a walk through the park, or I'm going to walk to the bus stop, and I'm going to notice 5 things that I haven't noticed before. Bringing yourself into this moment. You can be sitting on the bus doing it. You can think, okay, I'm not going to scroll through Instagram. The basics. I think that's really important, that we really always bring ourselves back down to the basics when it comes to this, the bubble and the bubble and the bubble and the bubble of what wellness means online.
Yeah, I think a lot of the health and wellness journey I think for me is built upon not knowing and curiosity. But what does that look like on social media when you've got 30 seconds to make a message? It's not going to work. So people, they tell you what is going to work, and it's about knowing, but it's about this, again, the power of like, this will do this for you in this much time, short time, and you can have this. But so much of that journey is opening where we're closed. And the opening cannot be towards something else we know. It's just another closing. Without opening, where are you going to connect to yourself, to your body? And so there needs to be that inspirational part. But I think it's still a lot about, this will do this for you, which maybe helps immediately, but it shuts the door later on. And I think that for me is so much the part. It's the slightly humiliating at times, humbling, definitely vulnerable journey of being like, I don't know. But to find the joy in that feels powerful, but I'm not sure how that resonates with social media.
I mean, I think it's really refreshing, because all we see all day long on social media, especially in wellness, is this kind of very pushy, very performative, very competitive idea about who's the wellest, who's doing it right, who's figured out their morning routine and their mindset. And like you say, Inner Peace is completely at odds with a 30-second video telling you with surety that this is what you need in life. And I think there's also a criticism levied against a lot of people who are dealing with subjects like manifestation, that they're also speaking from a place of privilege. It's all very well if you are someone who already has a lot of money, a lot of resources at their disposal, talking about how to manifest £1 million. I mean, those sorts of people can be quite dangerous on social media, because they're speaking primarily to a very young audience, telling them that they can have whatever they want in life if they write in their gratitude journal. And those habits can actually be really, really wonderful for mental health, for opening up, for that curiosity that you talk about. But they can also potentially give people the wrong idea about how to go after what they want in life, about forcing it, which is something that you touched on, Jonny. Do you think that, there are much simpler ways to unlock this kind of thing? And do you think there's a danger with manifestation coaches telling young people what they can achieve?
It's the law of attraction, really, and it's old. It's an old thing. It's this idea of frequency attracts frequency. What happens when we simplify for Instagram is that so suddenly we've got a 30-second clip of write in your gratitude journal, like you say, and everything will be well with the world. And ultimately, life is what life is. It's perfectly imperfect. And what I'm loving about just sharing the story and hearing it, it's messy, right? So firstly, it's great to get yourself into a positive mindset, okay? But what we don't do with a positive mindset is we don't go into a toxic positive mindset, which means that nothing exists apart from this thing that I'm toxically manifesting, because I'm going to stay really positive about it. Because ultimately what we want to think about is the journey too. So we do have a vision for our future, because visioning in is really important. It's allowing yourself to imagine. So many of us don't allow ourselves to imagine. And especially if we've grown up in households where it's, we haven't been supported, we don't dare to dream. So daring to dream is a breaking a limitation in itself, and it's really powerful and really important. But also it's really important and very powerful to take care of the parts of yourself that don't believe that you deserve that dream. Because if you don't take care of those parts, then you'll end up just going around in the same circle. And that's why manifestation, Instagram manifestation, can sort of lead you up the garden path a little bit, because we can't get from A to D or B or C. We have to do B and C. We have to do those bits in the middle. I'm really consciously manifesting with the 5% of my conscious brain, because remember, 95% is unconscious, that I want the new job. I want the relationship of my dreams. I want to get married. I want to do all of these things, but it just keeps looping around. It keeps looping around because your unconscious thoughts are telling you that you don't deserve them. So we need to go in, we need to vision in, and we need to go deep too. So the two are really, really important. And what often happens with Instagram is it's the shortcut, right? It's the shortcut version, and that's why it gets a bad rap.
I love the section in your book, actually, where you talk about how manifestation is not necessarily about thinking about things that you want all of the time. It's about doing a bit of work on yourself. It's about healing. It's about thinking, okay, am I ready to actually receive those things? Because if I'm not set up for them, there's no point wishing for them every single day. And that really hit hard when I read that, because I thought about Instagram manifestation and these short videos and a lot of the mantras that people are encouraging us to do. It's really cool stuff, but ultimately, if your mindset isn't there, if you're not ready to receive these things and you're having a poor relationship with yourself, it's going to be quite tricky, right?
It's tricky. So, I see it all the time. I mean, that's what my work is. That's what I see with my clients, and I hear it all the time, is that I'm affirming and I'm burning things at the full moon, and I'm writing down this and I'm writing down that, and I'm, and actually nothing changes. And nothing changes because of the 95% of your unconscious mind. Your 5% conscious mind is saying, I'm really ready for this. Your unconscious mind is still hung up on a story, potentially from your childhood, where you were bullied into believing that you weren't good enough to be in the cool group, or there's a trauma, or there's something happening that is limiting you. So our ability to receive, and I really love the words that you use about the softening, because that's actually a chapter of my book, is the softening, and the curiosity, which is literally like number one. You can stay curious. It's game on. And curiosity is all we need, really. If we can stay curious and soften, then we're in a place of receiving. And when we're in a place of receiving, what happens is the unconscious is what I call it's alchemizing, which is it's changing. So the affirmations have a place to land. It's like you're sowing seeds. If you imagine going into a garden, and I talk about that at the beginning of the book, but it's just a metaphor which is helpful for people to go into your garden. What does your garden look like, really? So when it's kind of a bit, it's full of weeds, and it's not the soil isn't a fertile place to all of this stuff that you're doing to sow these seeds, then the seeds will not grow. And really that's what a little bit of the work is. The inner work is the journey, is we're just creating that fertile ground. And it's such an invitation. Returning to your authentic self is it's the greatest gift that you can ever give yourself, because, you can sit in your own skin and love every part of what you're doing and being and expressing, and joy, you start to feel joy in its fullness, in its entirety. And that brings peace, and that brings serenity. And ultimately you're manifesting a good life.
So if someone were at the beginning of their journey, because studies show that we tend to hone in on the negative, right? So we tend to remember the one negative thing we heard about ourselves, as opposed to many, many positive things we might be hearing from other people, and we hold on to it. I wonder how, if someone's at the beginning of this journey, how do they suddenly shift their mindset? How can you start thinking positively if all you've been thinking about yourself is negative?
I can use a couple of sort of anecdotes, because I work with people that are trying to, like I said before, kick a ball a long way through a tiny thing, and it seems really challenging, but they've got this gift and whatever it is. But one of the things that comes up quite often is I'll say, okay, I want you to kick this ball, and I want you to tell me how it feels. It's really difficult. I never like to use an out of number because it limits it. But for the purpose of making it simple for the player, I say, let's say out of 10, how does that one feel? And what they'll do is they'll kick the ball, and they'll go, and they'll look at the ball, and then they'll tell me a mark. And I say, don't look at the ball. The ball doesn't tell you, what that felt like. Feel it. So it's like, okay, next one. So don't look at the ball. So they'll kick the ball, and they'll go, and look at me and try and gauge from me what it looks like looking at me. So they're trying to use me as a surrogate for the ball to be like 9. And I'm looking, saying, this is the first point, is that the first part of that journey is to start feeling what it is that, so that you can connect to it. The next thing I'd say is, okay, right, now let's go to your imagination. So no ball. I want you to go and pretend to kick a ball. And an easy one is to say, right, do it with your left foot. And so they'll start in their imagination, eyes closed, and they'll start standing like this. And I'm like, in your imagination, your left foot is your weaker foot. It's your imagination. You can be anything you want to be, but you've already dreamed that you've got a weak foot. So you go, okay, just how do you want it to be? If they hold true to that process for about, I'd say 6 kicks, the outside world suddenly starts to shape up to the inside. But it takes 6 kicks. And that 6 kicks is a bit like that childhood thing. 1, you're like, okay, I'll go again. 2 is like, no, I'm not allowed to go again because, two in a row, I'm probably not good enough. It's not working. What's the point? But what does it take to go again? To say, no, this is more important than that. How I am on the inside, how I am, what I'm doing with my internal, I'm going to stay true to that for just a bit longer. And suddenly, before you know it, things are shaping up.
What you're doing, just going back to the idea of visioning in, we're visioning in, and I love the process. So the process is, the first part is looking out and going, I can't do it. Second part is, confirmation, affirmation, external affirmation, like, what do you think? And then that resilience, that thing of going back in, because your question is, we need you to get back into yourself. We need you to be feeling for yourself. Yeah. And that's what creates a new neural pathway. So 6 of those kicks, and it's why, we have challenges, the 21-day, 28-day challenge, because they create new habits. So somewhere we do need action, right? So somewhere we need that thing of doing, like, I want to be in the next Wimbledon, somewhere we do need to show up to that.
A player came to me and was sort of saying, the ball's going left and I've got this game this weekend and I'm really worried. And you can feel the energy's right up and it's up here and the feet are out the ground. It's like, oh, and you kind of go, okay. And now I think what I used to do to myself, and I think what he wanted me to do, was answer those thoughts, give him like, it's okay because we're going to do this, guarantee, so that you can calm the energy or try to calm the energy. But I don't want to reassure those negative thoughts, because those negative thoughts will start asking me for more reassurance because it feels quite good. So we went for a bit of a walk around the pitch, not explicitly saying what we were doing, but whilst I'm walking, I'm kind of like just passing the ball. And as we're passing the ball, I'm making it do some funny things. I'm playing with it a bit and he starts to join in a bit. And then we have a bit of a chat and the chat starts to move a little bit. And then he wanders back, puts the ball down on the tee and is setting the ball up. And about 3 or 4 minutes ago, he's saying, it's going left and this game. And now he sets the ball up and he turns to me and says, did you see that program last night on TV? And I'm like, we haven't answered any of your problems, but now you've got different thoughts. And I think we still think if we answer all our problems, we'll get different thoughts. If we answer our problems, we get more problems to answer. But if we shift our energy in this process of mindfulness, we can start to curiously explore what happens if I just relax here. Going for a walk in the forest, I can tell the way the thoughts that are coming through me at the beginning and towards 5 minutes in, I am a different person. I'm thinking differently. And people always say, that's where I do my best thinking. I think it's where energy shifting takes place. And therefore, as you mentioned, frequency, different thoughts appear out of a different energy. So I use my thoughts as symptoms of what's happening deeper down instead of thoughts as the issue. And so instead of trying to treat the symptoms, I kind of go, I don't like these thoughts. I need to ask, are they actually true? And how do I do that? Well, if they're telling me that I need to do this, then I'm going to see if I can relax. And if I can, they can't be true. And then new thoughts come and you go, that was kind of empowering. And then the curious thing says, I wonder how much of my life I can live in this space of allowing. And what I haven't found is that it becomes aimless. It becomes the opposite. And I think that's the feeling that a lot of people feel. It's like, but if I'm not constantly on my day, I'm going to end up, driving the completely wrong way, forgetting how to drive in the first place and all these other things. But it just isn't the point on a rugby field. When you enter the zone, you don't start attacking the wrong posts. You know exactly why you're there. And that intelligence and the intention is at the base of what or is really pervading everything you're doing, but just effortlessly instead of through stress.
I also wanted to ask whether the key to mindfulness really is sort of stepping out of your own way and putting aside all these expectations that you might have had for yourself. So the idea that when you're growing up, you think you might grow up to be a doctor or a writer or a rugby player. And then actually thinking, well, what about if I'm not? What about if I just allow things to unfold for myself?
The need to become something is that, the creator falling in love with your creation, losing sight of your creativity. It's almost, that's what came with me with the rugby players. Like the intuitive thing was, I love this ball in my hands and I love being out here. And there's so much at play, connecting with other individuals, testing my body, facing challenge, taking on this anxiety, this insecurity, all of that's embedded within it. But you make it just about winning that trophy at the end. And then you start missing this beauty. And it takes you a bit of a while to realize, oh my gosh, there's so much at play there. Those desires are often, for me, guiding me somehow, either through contrast or through affirmation towards who I really am. Rugby seemed to be about connecting with people, facing anxiety. And now my work seems to be to explore that from that position. When you are willing to stride forward and with your full presence, if you could ever look back, it's always a beautiful straight line. You kind of go, it always makes so much sense. But when you try and look forward and work it all out, it never makes sense. And I think just that power to sort of go, right, this is how I feel and I'm going. All I can take in my life is the next step and I'm going.
It does take courage, and you use that word quite a lot, and there's a resilience around that, right? And it has to grow. It's like a bicep coming back in. You build that bicep. I always say that to people: just give yourself a moment to just build the bicep of your own voice inside. But then you can kind of back yourself with that, right? So if we're manifesting something new, and it's kind of a little bit off piece, but you can kind of back yourself with this new idea because you're feeling it really in your bones. No one else is feeling it. You know, I always say that you're the one that knows your dream. You are the one that can that has that vision, and everyone around you. There may be no one that's actually affirming that for you, but when we are really deeply affirming it for ourselves, then we can, manifest more. But it is this habit forming thing of giving yourself permission to shapeshift, to become more, to change, to pivot, to explore.
I love that. And that, it seems to me, is really the secret to getting started on this journey. Small habits, reaffirming those ideas that we are enough, we can do things. It's not some crazy hack. It just makes sense, right?
Do you feel that takes place in your small decisions? A lot of these talks about, who should I become? What job do I want to do? I'm not sure what my passion is in life. But then someone says, do you want to come to dinner? And you tune in and go, the initial part goes, oh gosh, no, not blooming dinner. But if you tune in and go, I think it's a yes. And then you find that yes may open up to another thing, which then leads you. And suddenly following that, I love the expression that the path of highest excitement and passion always seems to be the path of greatest challenge, but also of greatest wisdom. And you follow it and you kind of, before you know it, it's gathered momentum, but we're waiting for that absolute eureka moment. But actually it may be in the small ones that's being offered to us every day. And
also it's that thing of what is today, like the purpose, our daily purpose is just tuning in.
Yeah.
Right. And trusting. So I've got I have got a big idea. I want to write a book, but today it may just be about, I'm going to say yes to lunch, because yes to lunch is just inspiring and gets you out of your head and gets you out of the house and gets you out of yourself. Or I'm going to do something new, because again, the act of pushing the boundaries on, because we do need to move out of our comfort zone, but we often can't take the big leaps. So, and that's okay, because we're not really meant to. We're not hardwired for that. We're hardwired to do things that feel safe, actually. So how do we companion ourselves in a really safe way out of our comfort zones by taking those very, very small steps?
If you're looking for passion, it's like, I think there's probably signals everywhere, right here. But we're kind of like, I need to find it here. So we're missing them all. And I think that's such a big opportunity.
What I'm learning and taking away from a lot of what you're both saying is it's kind of about habit forming, isn't it? But it's not just about habits with our thoughts. It's about habits in terms of how we show up for ourselves, how we take care of ourselves. It's about being positive in every aspect of our daily lives. So I guess something small that you've hit upon, Jonny, that I've also now taken away, because these are some of my favourite things to have every day, are things like doing something good for my gut. The gut-brain connection is really strong. It can influence our mood. It can influence our ability to feel good. When did you kind of hit upon the idea that the gut, or, drinking something like this was really important for that habit building?
I knew body fitness from my career, but I didn't know health and well-being. And my entry point into that was the mental side. I'd always had crisis moments throughout my life because of how I grew up and the stance I had against life from a fearful perspective. But then I started exploring this understanding that actually there is no clear line between mental and physical, and the body and then the mind. It's like, no, it's all tied in, it's all one. And this beautiful thing about it all being one was behind the one living, the power, as we talk about with the messaging, to try and help this opening up and this curiosity and this inspiration. We've got a few different products, but they represent things that are really important. One of them, we have a living drink, a kombucha and water kefir, and the living side of it, the bacterial thing, has been a massive shift. The way that people look at bacteria, understanding it's part of us. It 10x is the number of genes we have in us. We have 20,000, but the bacterial part, that means we have 2 million. You're like, it's super intelligent. But also not just that, it's like the star player on a team. as soon as it's on the pitch, everything else starts coming alive, talking to each other better. The team becomes whole. And you get this understanding that health and well-being is not about A plus B equals C. It's more of a team spirit thing. You know, when you get a team together and you're like, how the hell are we doing this? That's health and well-being. When the body's coming together and it's all starting operating, functioning as a whole in its whole intelligence, it's an ever-expanding possibility. And then we have our health shots, which is kind of all these ridiculous number of super ingredients, all leaning towards different areas. But these ingredients, they don't just add up, they amplify again. And this idea, we're moving out of this idea that it's a journey of just, I have to do this plus this plus this, and it'll get me this. It's like, no, health and well-being is just not that. It's inspirational. It's magical. It can be. And then we've got a cool sort of CBD drink, which is, for me, is a bit like your coach's team talk. Everyone's a bit, and then it goes, listen, guys,
brings you down.
We're good. Yeah. We're good. You got this. Just come down. Like we said, I'm in survival. Let me just open up. It's not the coach's job to be, yeah, now we're amazing. It's the coach's job to be like, you need to realize you've got this. And that's what will make you feel amazing.
And I think it's important to remember, like you were saying, that authenticity, that inner voice is something we should maybe all be reaching for a little bit more, rather than comparing ourselves to other people, other people's journeys, thinking about what the TikTok coach is telling us. It's more about ourselves, coming home to ourselves. My final question for you both. What's your one non-negotiable for wellness?
For me, it's in that awareness and curiosity. Those two things. I think that allows for all my faculties to come to the fore, which means I feel present. I spent so long trying to work out what the hell a good life well lived is, and how I was going to make the most of a career, and how I'm making the most of this life. And there's no such thing as a life. There's just this moment. That question is never, can I make the most of this career? It's just, are you present here now? And what does that mean? And I know that as soon as I go into that awareness space, I have to be here, because I'm aware of whatever's taking place here. And the other part that keeps me from sort of, or allows me to keep growing, is the curiosity part. Life is connected to the magical. And now I see life through a magical lens rather than a formulaic one. And that's the shift of, what do you want to call it, mindfulness or whatever. It's like, you see a table and you see a floor and you see things and you see people and you see strategy and you see this and you see paths and you're like, yeah. Or you just see, wow. Even when it's not a great wow, it's still a damn wow, which makes it a great wow. That's what is the key to me. And curiosity, awareness, which ultimately means presence.
And I do think we are all quite guilty of time traveling, aren't we? We're thinking about what's next, what's happening in the future, or what happened in the past and how that defines us in the moment. But actually tapping into that presence and that curiosity is as you say, it's really magical.
Yeah, well, so far.
What would your one wellness non-negotiable be, Estelle?
Well, I think I have to say it's to get out of the mind, drop out of the mind and drop into the heart. That is the work that I do. And really, I always say, stay curious and see what happens. When we get out of the chatter of the mind, we drop into the heart, just with a really simple, breathing into the heart every day and just listening. That is an opening really to the magic, because this is our first organ. It really is a power organ. It's the field is 100 times more powerful than the mind's, and it has a memory, it has a brain of its own, just like the gut. So we've got these three brains. Why the gut is so important is because it really creates mood, it changes mood. But the heart is also an undiscovered mind. It has a heart mind that is scientifically proven. So my one thing is, my non-negotiable is, just in this moment, know that you're present, you're listening with all of you, and that's enough. Know that you're exactly where you're meant to be, and that's enough. And stay curious to this conversation and what's emerged for you, and let that be your guide.
That's also incredible advice. And I don't know about you guys, but I feel quite zen now, having listened to what you've both shared. Jonny, Estelle, thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Well Enough. It's been such a pleasure speaking with you both. If you want to listen to more of what Estelle and Jonny have to say, you can look them up on their own podcasts. Estelle's podcast is Love, Purpose, Connection, and Jonny's podcast is I Am. You can also find Estelle's book, Manifest Your True Essence, anywhere you buy books, and you can also shop for One Living in supermarkets near you and online too. Thank you very much for joining us, and in the meantime, stay well.